we all thought it would be nice to get a collaboration together to just kind of talk about what the current real estate transaction process looks like during this time. And, people are still buying and selling and refinancing. It just looks a little bit different. We're waiting for one more of our panelists, attorney Peter Irvine, but why don't we introduce who we have so far? So we can't go around in a circle. I don't know if you're all in different orders, but Pat, you're on my top left, so I'm going to start with you. If you want to just say who you are, where you work, and maybe where you're actually working from right now.
So I am Patrick Bruff. I am coming to you live from Fink & Paris Insurance Agency. I am actually in the office. There's only a handful of us that are actually working out of the office at the moment, but probably 90% of our staff are actually working from home. So I am one of the handful that is actually in the office.
Awesome. Alex, you look unmuted.
Alex Akers, 5 College Realtors. We're working from home right now. So sometimes on location, but right now from home.
Great background. And Lois?
I'm Lois Hunt Property Appraisal. I usually work at home, but I'm still out doing inspections a few days a week also.
First and foremost, we are just working on keeping everybody safe. So our 5th panelist just got here, Attorney Irvine. I am going to promote you so that you can be a part of the panel. Here we go. We'll get Peter logged in. How are you?
Good.
Good. We're going to put you right on the spot. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Peter Irvine. I'm an attorney in Northampton, and we're open for business.
Excellent. So, so we'll kind of, we have different representation here. Did I say by name? Lindsey, I'm with Applied Mortgage. I'm a loan officer. And so we have the lending side, we have a realtor, an appraiser, an attorney, and insurance. So really trying to get all different perspectives. Again, if you have any input you want through the chat and Zoom, we have quite a few people watching over Zoom. And then we have people watching on Facebook Live. So we'll continue to check those chat boxes. I think to get started, everybody's favorite part of real estate is actually looking at homes, right? So Alex, do you want to give us a little idea of what it looks like to be listing and showing houses right now?
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot in the past few weeks. It's slowed down quite a bit, and we're trying to, as best we can, sort of follow the intent of the governor's order, which is to stay at home as much as possible. But also there's a practicality and a reality to some people's lives at this moment anyway, where they have to buy or they have to sell. Their lease is ending or they're relocating for work. And so we want to be sensitive to that as well. So what we're doing is just basically taking all precautions that we can: gloves, masks, hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes, all of those things. And just really trying to also use video as much as we can for either FaceTime video tours or for new listings, posting video tours and open house tours, so people can really see it virtually without having to actually be present in the house.
Great. And I know a lot of that technology, doing video for listings and all that is kind of what a good realtor is working on, including right now. But what's a little bit different? Can you explain? I know some people are doing their home inspections maybe even over FaceTime. I've heard rumors about that, and maybe even showings kind of over more of a personalized walkthrough tour.
Absolutely. So some inspectors are really recommending that the buyers don't attend. There are some agents, someone I talked to just a couple of days ago, they're doing everything remotely. So the buyers would not attend the inspection. The inspector would go in, provide a report with photographs and details, and then do sort of a phone conference afterwards. There are a lot of buyers that are coming from other areas, so they're getting FaceTime tours. And essentially the realtor would just walk through and describe as he or she would, in any other showing if they were present. So it's changed quite a bit, but the real estate market is pretty flexible. So we come up with new plans as quickly as we need to.
Right. We try to be nimble. That's great. So when somebody actually decides they want to submit an offer, they would go through writing up the offer and making their real estate deposit. Is that really different at all, or is that something that was kind of typically done electronically anyway?
I think, some people still like to do old school meetings and have people come to the office, but for the sake of time and now safety, I think a lot of people have already gravitated toward electronic signature programs like .loop or DocuSign, and just allowing them to discuss. You could even do a FaceTime consultation about how to write an offer, what those components are, but then piecing it together electronically.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. So Lois, you're also on the side of the process that has to actually enter the house or gets to enter the house. I only get to see pictures. So do you want to just explain a little bit about the appraisal process from your point of view? And then I can also talk about some changes that have happened, what mortgage companies might be allowing on the appraisal side too.
Yeah, from your end of it. Well, we are still doing inspections. There are some products out there that, and Fannie Mae has, which Lindsey can speak to later, but they've loosened some of the regulations on interior inspections. But I have had all interior inspections for the last month or so. We were asked to, and I think it's just kind of make common sense precautions, going in the house with a mask, with gloves. We asked the client to, if possible, to have all the doors open. So we, the least amount of contact we have with the surfaces, the better for us, for them. I also had someone, I think I might start asking for this, family on Friday that I'm going to see is, they're going to all leave except for one person. I hate to insist or, ask somebody to have to do that, but I think that might be a good idea. So we're just trying to be as safe as possible. I also ask if they've been sick. I reassure them that I haven't. I've been asking them to make a list rather than having to, just limits the time. If they can make a list of improvements that they've made and leave it out for me, it's really helpful. So, it's changing as we go along. We're just trying to, kind of making it up as we go along. But I think staying safe is really the key thing here.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'll just comment a little bit on just from the lender's perspective. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are the major mortgage kind of regulating bodies, and slowly but surely and all throughout the week, there's been changes that have to do with the appraisal process, and depending on the specific type of program that you're using or what type of a property it is, whether it's a rental or your own house, you may be able to do an exterior only appraisal or what's called a desktop review appraisal. So the appraiser doesn't actually need to go into the property. And what people are doing instead, which Lois just mentioned, is actually kind of sending the appraiser specifics on their property. So if it's a refinance and they've done a lot of renovations on the house or whatever, they're sort of giving the appraiser that information just so that you do have an idea of what the inside of the property looks like. Because otherwise, I think with a desk review or exterior, you're basically pulling from what's available in the assessor's records. Is that right?
Assessor's records, we rely on the realtors if it's a sale. If it's sold recently, sometimes there's MLS information. And of course, we have a caveat in there that, this all has to be actually true. But we just try to gather as much as possible as we can to be as accurate as we can.
That's great.
So it's always better to, do the interior so that we can be more accurate, but do the best we can. Yeah.
Okay. And one last question that's come up quite a bit, which you sort of just answered, is, the pros and cons to interior or exterior. But it seems like, either way, you're gathering the information and figuring out a way to get the right specs on the property.
Yeah, I think, lenders, just from a collateral point of view, would be more comfortable if we had more information and we were actually on site to see it. But, over the years, exterior-only inspections have always been around as a product. So it's certainly not a problem to switch with that. And we just try to gather as much information as we can.
Definitely. Yeah. It's so interesting just to see the way the market kind of re-regulates and deregulates throughout the years, and how, some of these forms that are coming back were, 2006, 7, 8 after hearing everything. And so it's stuff that we've all dealt with, but it's all changes and definitely impacts the process. So Pat, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to just jump in there as far as inspections are
concerned. From the
insurance side of things, we do that as well. So one of the things we typically do when we're writing a new homeowner's policy is we go out and we do an exterior inspection. It's literally just pictures of the property, so we know what's going on, and the carrier knows. And the carriers will typically have followed up with usually a month or so later after they've written the policy, to schedule those kind of inspections, very similar to what you guys were talking about, their interior inspections where they're going through the house. And a large majority of our carriers have essentially waived that piece right now. And so they're not doing it, or if they're doing the exterior ones, if that. So it's right along the same lines of trying to keep everybody safe. They don't want anybody going into anybody's house. And again, as long as the information is true, as Lois said, as long as the information is true that we're getting when we're filling out our questionnaires, then the carrier is taking that as the right information. So,
what situation would be a typical situation where an insurance company would need to actually do an interior inspection?
Well, they do it a lot. I mean, they want to know what's in there, especially for the older homes. They're looking for things like the knob and tube wiring, or they're looking for staircases without railings. Back decks, same thing. There's not enough safety precautions for elevated surfaces and things like that. So that's pretty normal for them to do, actually, the inspection. And they're just looking to make sure that they're insuring a home that's safe and sound for them.
Definitely. Great.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to leave Peter out of the process here, because a really big kind of question around all of this has been the closing of real estate transactions. That is one piece that definitely still has to be done in person, because the paperwork has to be reviewed and notarized in person, at least at this point in Massachusetts. But just backtracking a little bit, because I know one of your big roles is also reviewing the purchase and sale agreement. So maybe just let's start with that, and whether or not you've really seen any changes there, or if that's something that's typically electronic anyway.
With the purchase and sale agreement, that we typically do that right after the inspections have happened. So we know that the deal is probably going to go forward. And that has evolved over the past bunch of years. When I started my practice, we used to get things by mail or fax, and that's changed. So we've already been exchanging documents electronically, and different lawyers have different practices, but I typically communicate with my clients by phone and email to discuss the purchase and sale agreement. So we've already eliminated the need for in-person meetings, except for the people that really find that helpful or want to do that. So that piece hasn't changed due to the current situation.
And what about the deposit check? Is that something where the realtor, I know, sometimes the buyers will give their down payment deposit with the purchase and sale. Alex, are you facilitating that exchange, or has that gone to mail?
Yeah, absolutely. We're still sort of trying to be the middle person. At least I am trying to be the middle person to minimize their exposure, even going to the office. But
so just gloves and sanitizer. Yeah. We have a couple of questions, and I just want to say on our Facebook Live, we have many people watching. So thanks everybody for joining us. We have Attorney Corliss, Becky Brown from Coldwell Banker, and Ryan from my office. So there's about 20 people on Facebook Live. There's 21 people in our Zoom meeting here. So I really thanks everybody for tuning in. And just in case you just hopped on either to the Zoom or the Facebook Live, we are talking about the changes that we have all encountered due to COVID-19 and just taking precautionary measures during real estate transactions. We would love your input on any questions that you have either in the Facebook Live chat or the Zoom chat. It looks like there's a couple questions in Zoom, Pat, related to insurance.
Yep.
So one of them I think you might have answered about doing insurance inspections. Yep. And then, Lou Davis is just asking, what happens if knob and tube is discovered during the insurance inspection?
So knob and tube is insurance in the insurance world is not a good thing. They want it removed. We do have an option. Typically goes into the fair plan. You're typically going to pay a lot more for the homeowner's policy. You can get coverage. So does it have to be removed? The short answer is no, if you want to continue to pay a little bit higher of a rate. However, that being said, to have it removed is not cheap. If you have it in a small section of your house, let's say you're buying a house, an older home, and it's part of we bought the house and somebody renovated the first floor, but the second floor still has the knob and tube, and we're going to renovate that second floor, and it's going to be done within 60 days, 30 to 60 days, somewhere in that time frame. We do have better options. We can put it with some of our admitted carriers. Will do that as long as they have a contract in place from an electrician saying that the knob and tube is going to be removed. So there are some options for that, but the short answer is you should have it removed. That's the short answer.
Good. All right, excellent. So why don't we, we'll go back to Peter and talk about the other changes just with the closing document side of things. So,
okay, when we get to the actual closing day, when people are coming in to sign documents, I've heard a number of things from various attorneys around Hampshire County, and everyone is really trying to keep everyone safe and minimize contact. So, for example, in my office, we have a large conference room that we're using, and I'm wearing a mask and gloves and encouraging the clients to wear masks and gloves and bring their own pens and maintain distance. Also, sending people documents in advance so that they can read them ahead of time has been very helpful. So you're not just showing up at the closing and suddenly you got this stack of documents and what does it all mean? So really trying to get the information to people ahead of time to minimize the amount of time that we're in a room together. Also minimizing the number of people that are in a room together. And so I've also heard other attorneys have, some people have a glass barrier, like plexiglass, dividing a room, or adjacent rooms that have glass between them and a little slider thing that you can open up and pass documents back and forth. It would be useful in this time if we didn't have to meet face to face, but there's still that requirement for some of the documents. So I think what's going to happen, and Lindsey, maybe I'll throw this back to you in a minute, is that the lenders will allow increasing numbers of documents to be signed electronically. But in Massachusetts, there's still a requirement that certain documents be notarized, and to be notarized, that has to be done in person with the signer and the notary in the same room. There is legislation pending in the Massachusetts legislature that would allow for remote online notarization, so a process where signers would be in a different physical location than the notary public. And for people not familiar with the process, usually closing attorneys are notary publics. So I, as an attorney, am notarizing the certain documents. So if that legislation goes through, there would be some technology attorneys would need to get in order to be able to record these virtual sessions where people notarize documents from a distance. If that happens, and again, it hasn't happened yet, but it looks like it might, then at that point, we would be able to do closings with complete physical separation. But until that happens, there's still this moment where at least a few of the documents would have to be in the same room.
Yeah, and I think what's really important that you're alluding to in all of that too is that, just because the regulation gets passed, if it does, it still means that the attorneys have to get the systems in place, have the correct software to actually be able to utilize the remote notarization. I'm imagining that whatever webinar program is used, it has to be secure and encrypted. So you probably won't just be able to do it over FaceTime.
Right. Yeah. It's, we can't do it through Zoom or FaceTime. There's particular software vendors that we would have to pick from, secure connections. The signers still have to be physically present in Massachusetts. So you can't have someone be in Vermont and sign documents. You have to be in Massachusetts. And it looks like there would also be a requirement that the physical documents do still change hands. So there would have to be some extra time allowed to get those documents from the people signing them to the attorney to complete that process. So it's still a bit cumbersome.
Right. Interesting. Okay. We have quite a few questions in the chat box. I might just go to, and then we can come back because obviously we all have more that we could discuss, but I want to make sure I hit these. So one question is whether a live tour used for inspections could also be done for the appraisal. So I'm assuming maybe that's a question for either Lois or Alex. I'm guessing, Lois, that you'd probably have to go to the property, but
a live tour meaning?
I think if there was a pre-recorded live tour.
Well, let's say I wasn't doing an interior inspection. If a homeowner agent was willing to give me a walkthrough video of the house, that's great. That's second best to being there. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that answers the question. That would be great.
Yeah, we can see. Yeah. The second question was about the time frame in all of this. So what are we seeing as far as whether all of this will create a longer time frame and what's the accommodation for all of that? So
I could speak to that a little bit. I think probably each of us has some piece of that. But on the attorney perspective, there has been discussion amongst local attorneys about being more flexible about timing, and I haven't met any resistance about that. I think everyone recognizes that this is a unique situation, and there can be all sorts of reasons why someone needs more time to complete the process. It does seem like everything is taking a little bit more time. There are processes that the attorneys have to complete, such as getting tax information from the towns. That just takes longer now because the people in the towns are only working certain hours. So everything takes a little longer, but so far it seems that everyone's been very understanding about that, and we're working it out.
I've seen an addendum getting circulated on some purchase and sale agreements. That's basically a COVID-19 addendum. Is that something that maybe Peter or Alex you're seeing more of? And what are your general thoughts on that type of an addendum?
Go ahead, Peter.
Yes, that is becoming standard, I think. Just some language saying that, hey, there's this crazy thing going on. Let's allow for a little more time as needed. Putting, some kind of end on it, but generally saying, if we get hung up on some step in the transaction, we'll allow more time for it.
Have you seen a standard time frame in that, Peter, like 30 days or 90 days?
in that range.
Both and.
Yes. I haven't seen more than 90. We're still staying optimistic.
Well, what's interesting too, I think, is that as we go through the inspection process, just the general home inspection process, it's taking a little bit longer to get contractor estimates, to find contractors that are willing to come out. So I think to speak to that initial question, I think it will be a little bit more of an elongated process, but probably not cumbersome. Just a little more effort here and there.
All right, I think that covered our chat questions. Anything I'm missing, Pat?
Nope, I think you got them all. Just a bunch of hellos over on Facebook. So
Yeah, awesome.
Everyone's very excited. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. So I also wanted to just go back. Oh, you know what? I have one question that actually Kathy asked, the question that I was kind of thinking about. And Lois, this is directed a little bit more at you with property values. So a question that I've been getting from people is kind of whether this is currently impacting property values or when we think it might. And obviously this is maybe an opinion question here too. So
yeah, I'll get my crystal ball out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Right now, because we have a 6-month field going back that we use data for determining a value. So there's still a good set of value indicators from the last 3 to 6 months. What my, concern is or thoughts are is that's as sales kind of taper off and, that may change in the next few months when we're looking back at this period. I have not noticed a decline in values yet. As a matter of fact, there's low inventory and there's been, some bidding, multiple people wanting properties. So that's probably going to contribute toward keeping things buoyant for the time being.
Lindsey, there is a question here in the Q&A. I'm going to read it from Nicholas. We've heard of some underwriting changes and tightening of guidelines. I think most have heard of FHA and VA guidelines tightening. But have conventional guidelines seen a change that changes and attorneys representing buyers should be aware of, even for buyers who are pre-qualified?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there have been changes, and yes, if you have a buyer or if you are a buyer and you've been pre-approved, you should definitely check in with your lender always before you submit an offer. I suggest that anyway, but especially during this time, we are seeing mortgage regulations changing. Where we're seeing the most changes are kind of at either end of the spectrum. So the loan programs that are for what are called jumbo loan clients, which is basically the higher end of the market, those fall into a different category. Regulations around credit score requirements and reserves, which is the money you have left over after closing, seem to be tightening up a little bit. Some lenders, like some of the bigger players, actually kind of pulled out of that market entirely, which is interesting. It's just a different pool of investors there. And then on the lower credit score, lower down payment, where you might see some of the government financing, FHA, VA, rural housing, yes, we're also seeing some changes there too.
Another question that just popped up was, are pre-approvals being approached differently with jobs being held closed for non-essential businesses, for example?
Yeah, great question. So all of this is changing all the time. So just kind of disclaimer, this is where the regulations are now. They're different for everybody's specific situation. They're different depending on what loan program you're using, what property type it is. But in general, yes, we do have to verify that people are still working.
And also that not only at the pre-approval stage, but just before the closing.
Exactly.
And at the closing. buyers have to sign documents saying that they haven't had a sudden change in financial circumstances. So if someone gets furloughed the day before the closing or the morning of the closing, that's a problem. And that would have to be disclosed. And hopefully people could agree to delay the process until the person's back on the job. But that is something to be very conscious of.
Yeah. And what we're basically doing, at least with our, active people who are in process, is really just communicating. I mean, if anything, this whole time right now, what we're all experiencing, it's just requiring that much more of a level of communication, where we want buyers to be aware that they need to keep us updated if their financial situation changes. We need to stay in touch with realtors, to make sure pre-approvals are updated. We need to stay in touch with the appraisers and the insurance companies and the attorneys, because all of the paperwork and documentation is rapidly changing. So really, it's just the need to be that much more collaborative during this time.
More emails.
Zoom calls and emails. Excellent. Any other questions? Yeah, we have a couple more in the chat box. So this one's directed at Peter. Have you found most attorneys that are on the other side of your transactions to be cooperative in finding ways to exchange documents and checks for closing in a manner that minimizes personal contact? Have you had any dismissive attorneys? You don't have to name names.
One of the things I love about the Valley is it's a close-knit community and people generally manage to get along. So to date, I've been able to work things out with everyone I've been involved with in closings, and doing things such as exchanging documents. Some documents we can exchange ahead of time, so we're doing that. Some documents are being put in envelopes and tossed from one car to another. Whatever you can do to minimize actual contact. And also sometimes there's a need to move money around, and there's an ongoing debate, I think, about using checks versus wires, because 6 months, a year ago, we were looking at a lot of issues with fraud around using wires to move large amounts of money. So there's concern about that, and some people think, well, maybe we should go back to using checks. But now there's the problem of, well, we want to avoid passing things from one person to another. So it's in flux. It really depends on who I'm working with as to what we figure out. But so far, everyone's been very cooperative. I fortunately have not run into anyone who's saying, hey, you gotta come to my office in person, and you don't, you're gonna be in trouble.
Great. And have you noticed, just as far as things that are helpful, like prorated items, real estate taxes, water and sewer bills, fuel adjustments, are you suggesting that people kind of get those bills up front so that at least you have something if you can't get a hold of the town or whatever the company is?
We've had some difficulties with getting the right information in a timely fashion, which is not the fault of anyone at any of those sources of the information. It's just the fault of the situation. So we have been trying, we sort of bumped back all of our usual timelines. So whereas there might be some piece of information that we might in the past have gotten a week before the closing, now we're trying to get it 2 weeks before the closing, allow for that extra time. So yeah, we're generally trying to do everything sooner than we would have in other times.
Yeah.
And as we were saying before, everything's getting stretched out a little bit.
Right. So proactive communication again is key.
Yep.
I have one other question that we had for Pat, which is around just the insurance process. A lot of people, so right now people are looking into potentially refinancing their houses because they're really thinking about their budget and saving. And so some people are asking when they should be sort of reviewing their insurance policies.
Yeah. Sure. So you should review your policy. The best time to do it is at least 30 to 45 days before the renewal process. Like if they're not refinancing, just in general, or when you have time, take a look at the policy. The process for us as far as refinancing or changing the carrier, I'm sorry, not changing the carrier, but changing the banks, is something that it's easy for us to do. We can help review the policy. Right now, we're in a good spot. We have all of our staff they're all working from home. So if you call the office, if you call either one of our offices and you ask to speak to Carmela or Tanya or whoever it may be, they'll transfer you to them like they're sitting here, but they're like most people sitting at their kitchen table. And they're always willing to go over the policy with whoever has questions about it. That's one of the things we pride ourselves on, is making sure that people understand the policy, because it's a contract, and like the other things, sometimes it's not as easy to read as you're flipping through those pages. But now is a great time. A lot of people have a lot of time on their hands, so it doesn't hurt to pick up the policy or call us or email us. Again, we're doing the same thing, trying to keep people safe. So calling is always the easiest one. Email. We have the ability to FaceTime with people who want to see somebody when they're having a discussion. So
great. Yeah, I think that's the one benefit where the whole industry really over the last probably 3 to 5 years kind of went digital. I mean, for the most part, the mortgage application can be processed right from your phone or whatever online. The insurance application can be. You can write your offer, you can do the purchase and sale. So there are, of course, still some of the in-person processes that are definitely causing a little bit more delay and just precautionary measures. But luckily, the industry's really adapted and been pretty nimble, considering how, massive of an industry it actually is. One other question, probably, Peter, from an attorney's perspective, a lot of people have been nervous about kind of what is shut down and whether that's going to have an impact on the closing process, mostly like the registry, for example. So I won't answer the question for you, but can you just talk a little bit about gap coverage and what that actually means when it comes to the title insurance?
So over the past couple of years, we have Massachusetts has opened up the possibility of electronic recording of deeds and mortgages. So the documents that have to get to the Registry of Deeds in order to be official. So we had already been doing that for some closings, and although the Western Massachusetts counties have that electronic recording capability, personally, I still like walking over to the registry in Northampton because, it's just down the road. But for Springfield and Greenfield, I've been electronically recording the past year. At the moment, those registries of deeds are still open for electronic recording. And the Hampshire registry, the latest word I heard there is that they will continue to remain open so that we'll be able to complete the closings. In the event that a registry does close and is not even accepting electronic documents, then the title insurance companies can provide what's called gap coverage, where we would still be able to go on record, complete the closing, people can move into their house, but we would hold the documents until the registry opens again and get on record as soon as we can when the registry opens. But the title insurance companies would provide coverage so that if something happened in between, it would be insured as far as the title goes.
And is that typical that you're able to obtain a gap title insurance coverage, or are there specific properties that you usually aren't able to, or the title company isn't able to insure?
It seems that in most cases that will be a possibility. Fortunately, it hasn't been a requirement yet because the registries are still open. There may be some specific issues that come up that can be more troublesome, such as registered land. But most of our properties around here are not in that category. There is also a related problem that's come up, which is, while the Registry of Deeds is open for accepting documents and open for searching electronically, that is, we can search their records from any computer, the Register of Probate is not open to the same extent. So the records at the probate court, some of them are searchable electronically, but there are some that their indexes don't go back quite as far. So I have already run into a couple of situations where there's a probate in the chain of title that needs to be examined and no one can get access to the records because the probate court is closed. So that's still something that's getting figured out. Title insurance companies are helping with that, but there's a few potential snags there.
Great. All right. So it sounds like everything's pushing through on the closing side, at least. I just want to circle back to Alex and Lois, because you're also, kind of boots on the ground, going into the houses and looking at everything. And when we were all kind of just having a brainstorm session earlier in the week, and Alex, you mentioned that one difference was sort of the way that showings are happening, where there aren't really open houses anymore right now, but instead you're still kind of having that maybe 3-hour window. Can you just describe how the showings are facilitated?
Yeah, so we can't have more than, 10 people in a given space. So generally what has been effective is maybe blocking out a 3-hour window and doing incremental showings of like 20 minutes with a buffer built in between. And so it was very effective. I did one just like that the other day. And so, it's effective in that buyers are still able to see the property, no one's being put at risk, and then everything is sanitized. And or, the sellers can turn on all the lights the owners can turn on all the lights before they leave, turn them off, and we're really just the stewards of the property, making sure that the questions are answered and everyone's sort of flowing through the property well.
Yeah, that's great. And Lois, I had somebody who asked, in lieu of the appraiser going inside of their house, could the appraiser take a ladder and put it up to the second-story window and look in to see the renovations that they've done?
Oh my! Seriously?
I did, yeah.
Oh,
I'm guessing.
That's funny.
I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, that's a little. I don't know.
But I like what you were saying before about a recorded video.
I've been thinking about it since you said it a little while ago. It might be one good stopgap measure to, really help us out. So something to look into anyway.
Excellent. All right.
Definitely.
I want to just fly a drone through the house.
Yeah, definitely.
It can be done.
To do that. Yeah, Pat, you could do it.
I could do that.
Awesome. So so we're probably about ready to wrap up. I just want to see if anyone else, either on the Zoom webinar or Facebook chat, has anything else, any other comments. Thanks everybody for participating too.
Thank you.
Anyone else in our group have any questions at all?
No, I thank you very much for letting us participate in this with you. It's a great experience to get the word out as to what's going on all over in the industry. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think for everybody's piece, it speaks to what we can be doing now. Prepping buyers to get their team ready to contact you to get pre-approved, to contact Peter and line up their lender, their home inspector, their attorney. So when we're able to see things in great mass, they'll be ready.
Definitely.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks a lot, Lindsey, for this. It's been helpful for all of us, I think.
It's great to see faces and actually have some type of a meeting here. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll work on keeping everything updated. If you are in the real estate industry, there's a Facebook group, Western Mass Real Estate Professionals, where I'm trying to keep updates on. So feel free to join that open forum where everybody can post. And I just think the more we collaborate and work together, the better we can serve the whole valley.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's it for no more questions. So I hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lindsey.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Lindsey. Have a great night, everyone.
You bet.
Thanks.